This is the Tulsa World Newsroom podcast. I'm editor Jason Collington of the Tulsa World. I'm here today with staff photographer Mike Simons, one of our veteran guys who has shot everything and anything during his long career here. And today in this podcast, we're going to be talking about three of his photos that have really stuck with him. He's taken millions of them, and we're going to talk about three of them. This podcast is where I get a chance to talk to the reporters, the photographers, the editors of the Tulsa World and get the stories behind the stories. I thought this first episode would be a good place to start with Mike Simons, one of the veterans and one of the best journalists I've ever worked with in my career. Mike, we've got three photos that you've picked out. Why don't you start with the first one? Why not? Let's just start at a KKK rally.
That's right. When you asked me to pick three photos, I kind of thought I would pick from the beginning of my career at the Tulsa World, kind of the middle of my career, and then this year or last year. So that's why I picked that photo. It was one of my first, it was, I think, 1997. The KKK had a rally in Tulsa. And kind of the setup for the rally was they were on the courthouse steps. And back then, there was no road that ran through the middle of the street. It was just a plaza. And so the way that the city divided it up was they put the KKK on the courthouse steps where they wanted to be, where their permit was for. And then they put protesters over on the library side. And they put barricades up, and in the middle, where the road is, they had the media. So we were kind of between the protesters and the KKK, and that's kind of the setup. And,
wow. Okay.
And the idea was to keep the protesters away from the KKK, and that's what the goal of that setup was. Throughout the day, that was pretty successful. It seemed like the KKK's goal in being there was to upset protesters, cause them to riot and make them look bad. And they were kind of well on their way of doing that. But then towards the end of the protest, towards the end of the rally, a protester made their way somehow through the barricades and into the KKK side. And that was Tiffany Lanigan. And she threw up what is, I guess, a Black Power fist in front of the KKK. And at that moment, that was kind of the picture. But then the national director of the KKK came up and stood in front of her and put up the Heil Hitler symbol. So it would kind of, that picture kind of encapsulated the whole thing. It was kind of right there, both sides. The only thing I wish was different about the picture was I wish I was on the other side so I could have seen Tiffany's face instead of the KKK director's face, because I feel like what she did was pretty brave, going as a Black woman, going and standing in front of the KKK. And so I wish I could have highlighted her more. I did have pictures of her walking away and that sort of thing, but I wish the picture was her face and not his face. But we were. Did
you see them coming together? I mean, tell me the moments before you captured this moment.
It was a long time ago, but as I remember it, I was standing kind of at the barricade on the KKK side of the plaza, and all of a sudden she was there. I didn't see her walking up. I don't know how she got over there. I don't think she was supposed to be over there. And I think shortly after that photo, as I remember it, law enforcement officers came and kind of escorted her away, and that was the end of it. But it was a quick thing. I mean, it didn't last too long, but yeah.
Well, in the second photo that you picked, it was a portrait that you took pretty recently. And there's something about it. I remember getting in our photo system when you said you had something. And when Mike Simons says that he's got something, guys, he's got something. And so I remember looking at that, and there was just, it's weird to say, but there was a tone to it, Mike. There was a feeling about it. Tell me the story behind that photo.
Okay, so several years ago, I started a project called Street Level, and that project kind of led to this photo in a way. That project was, I started on Peoria and I walked the entire length of Peoria 1 mile at a time and photographed people. And it really kind of changed the way I shoot. The story ended up being just kind of people I met along the way. I would talk to them, tell a little bit about them, shoot a portrait of them, or shoot them doing whatever they were doing. And when that project ended, I ended up doing all of Peoria, all of 21st Street, and all of Charles Page Boulevard, walking 1 mile at a time and photographing people I met. And then when that project kind of ended, I kept doing it basically. So if I'm out and see somebody that looks interesting or somebody I want to know more about, I stop and talk to them and usually make a portrait of them. And so on this day, I was sent to Nowata because there was a tornado that supposedly touched down in Nowata. But when I got to Nowata, I couldn't find any tornado damage. Must have been which is a lot of times the case.
Correct.
in newspaper photography.
Yes.
So
while I
had editors talking to me on the phone, telling me to find this tornado damage, I was driving back and forth through Nowata all around. And I saw Willie just standing on the side of the road doing chores basically on some property. And I had to stop and talk to him and find out about him. And he was just an interesting guy. He thought the whole thing was funny, that here he was going about his daily chores and he sees a car zipping by and the brakes hit suddenly and turn into the parking lot. And I came running out with my camera, and he found the whole thing kind of funny because, as interesting and amazing as he looks, that's just how he looks to himself. So he didn't see anything unusual about it. And so when I moved in really close for a portrait, he kind of really started laughing, and that's the photo. And I love the photo. It's a happy photo. Journalists a lot of times are shooting unhappy photos, which, that's just the job. And having a photo that I've never really seen anybody look at that photo and not smile. So,
you said you shot differently before those street level projects. How did you shoot before, and how do you shoot now, would you say?
So before, I would go to my assignments and, I would see interesting people along the way, but there was no real compelling reason to stop and talk to them and photograph them. Now, after doing that project, I am kind of obsessed with stopping and talking to those people. It has since evolved into a gallery on the Tulsa World website called Talking to Strangers. A lot of times also news photographers have to photograph people that don't want to be photographed.
Yeah.
And that's just part of the job. With this and this style or this approach or project or whatever you want to call it, I typically don't photograph people if they don't want to be photographed. If I stop and talk to somebody, if they say, I'm not really into that, I typically don't take their picture, and they're fine with it. But I still have the conversation, because the whole reason I stopped in the first place is I want to know them and I want to know more about them. So a lot of times some of the coolest people that I stop and talk to, some of the coolest strangers I stop and talk to, never get their picture taken, but we still have a good talk and have fun talking, and I learn about them. And the best thing about doing that is, every once in a while it turns into something more. A few years ago, I saw a woman at a Quick Trip in West Tulsa, the Southwest Boulevard and 23rd Street Quick Trip, and she was sitting in a scooter, like for
reasons.
And she had a sign on the front of her scooter that said crazy bird watcher coming through or whatever. And so I just had to know more about her, and I stopped and took her picture, and we got to talking, and it ended up, I did a whole story about her. She was a bird watcher, but she was limited to the Quick Trip parking lot basically. And so she just watched ugly parking lot birds. And it was a great story. It was about finding beauty where most people don't find beauty. And through that story about Kim Fowler, somebody saw the story in the paper and knew that she was only limited to that parking lot because her scooter, she was worried her scooter would break down. And they donated a new scooter to her. So then I was able to go with her to the River Park West Festival Park, where she was able to see Canadian geese for the first time in a long time, and she broke down in tears. And it was just a fun story. And like I said, when you are out meeting people and finding reasons to stop and talk to them, you know, that's you find stories. And
well, when people ask me why I love Mike Simons, that story right there reminds me. That was a great story. We ended up writing a follow-up when she got the new scooter. And again, was it news? I think it was, because again, we try to capture the news of the day. We try to capture the things to do. We try to do in-depth stuff, investigative stuff, but sometimes we just need to write some people stories. And and again, you and I worked on a magazine project on Martin Luther King Boulevard in Tulsa. And I can tell you that going on an assignment with Mike Simons, he's going to stop 5 times on the way to the assignment because he's going to see things. I remember you and I turning around 2 or 3 times on the way to getting to our destination. You're like, whoa, wait a second. I want to go talk to that guy. Oh, well, hold on. But that's a cool look. Let me turn around. So the number of U-turns Mike Simons does on a regular basis, I would guess are you do a lot of them.
Yeah, I do. Just another kind of to complete the story about Kim. A year or 2 ago, she passed away, and they were not able to afford a funeral for her. So somebody called me and asked if we could do a story, and we ran an update on Kim that she had passed away, and they were trying to afford the funeral. And our readers donated enough money for her to get cremated and given a proper send off. So, you know, that's the point.
It is. And again, our readers, I hear from them often, and they've helped us raise millions and millions of dollars every Christmas season for Project Santa. I remember I've got some readers who let me know that they read the Tulsa World with a checkbook, and they see things and they see people who need help, and they do that. This is like you said, this is why we do it. Mike, let's talk about your last photo. Another one that was striking, was tough to see. Take us to the story behind that photo.
So, couple years ago, the city of Tulsa restarted the search for remains or victims from the Tulsa Race Massacre. They've been doing it for decades now, and I photographed that for I think the first time I photographed them searching was in '98. So it's been going on for a while, and they found credible evidence that there may be a mass grave in Oaklawn Cemetery, a couple of them. So for the last couple years, this has been going on. They dug in one spot, no mass grave, and then they dug in a spot closer to 11th Street, and did find a mass grave. And so they exhumed all the bodies in the grave, all the remains, and did forensic analysis on them. And then this picture came when they were reburying the remains. Kevin Ross is the chair of the oversight committee for that project, and he was there when they were reburying the remains, and he arrived in the morning and walked over to the trench, they call it, where they were going to rebury, and had a moment of quiet solitude looking at the remains. And you could kind of see in his body language that everything that they had been working on had kind of come together and was kind of coming to an end for that part of it. And he was emotional, and that picture kind of captured that. And I believe it was important for the media to be there, an independent media to be there to document this. And that's why I picked this picture. I think it kind of highlights what our job in society is.
Yeah, in 2021 was the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre, and again, you were part of a team that the whole newsroom was a part of trying to cover that, document it, look back, but also talk about today and look forward. And I know that you spent so many hours out there, Mike. I remember one night driving home late from work, I saw you out there right there at the site where you took this photo, and talking to a local legislature, legislator, a city councilor, some other people that had gathered there, and you ended up doing some drone stuff, and I stood there listening to you just passionately talk about how important it was to be there. We had some issues with trying to be able to have the access that we wanted, and you were, you were just there. And those photos not only appeared in the Tulsa World, they appeared in papers all over the country. I agree. It was important for us to be there. We had some issues with, oh, we'll give you some photos. Oh, we'll give you some video. And we were like, no. And again, you took the lead on this, Mike. We wanted to be the ones who document this. We wanted to be there to show people what this looked like. It was a controversial thing for the mayor and the city to, give money to go and look for these mass graves. I mean, our mayor has said that he believes this is an open homicide investigation, even 100 years later. And I think this photo, we ran it, and it was one of the photos of the year, of course. But it was a photo that, again, a lot of people in a lot of places saw because it was distributed widely. And for me, it's one of your shots that's going to still be with me a long time from now. That's what you do. You try to capture the stuff that will stick with you.
Well, yeah, I really did believe it was very important for us to be out there. And, there were days where, most days that I was out there, there was no assignment per se to be out there.
Right.
But between my other assignments, I would stop by. I mean, this went on for, I think, 2 months when they were exhuming bodies. And so, between my other assignments, I would stop by and take photos. And, the city did put up a fence and a shroud kind of to where it was hard to see. And like I said, I just believe that, we as the Tulsa World, as independent media in this town, we owe it to whoever they're digging up to be there to document it. We owe it to the community members to be there to document it. They may not be race massacre victims. They may be. We don't know at this point. Either way, I feel like it was important for me to be there to document it.
Yeah, those results have not come back yet. As I said, they put the remains in those coffins. They put them back in the ground, and then we're waiting for those test results. And of course, we'll report on that. Because again, many times when you were there were family members, distant family members, sitting there wondering, is that my relative that we don't ever know what happened?
Right. Yeah.
Unfortunately, so many families, they don't know what happened to their family members in 1921. And
I'll just add that, in 1921, there was a group of photographers who went around and took photos of what was happening. Officials at that time didn't want those photos taken. Officials at that time wanted those photos to disappear. Had it not been for those photographers, we probably wouldn't know about the race massacre. We would know oral histories, but there would be enough people denying it and without that visual evidence. And that's why photojournalism is so important, because that visual evidence by independent members of the community is what we have hundreds of years from now. So
yeah, and again, when you think of some of the worst tragedies ever, many times you don't think about a story, you think about a photo. And we just had Martin Luther King Day the other day, and I was speaking to a class, this was years ago, and I said, hey, when you guys think of Martin, when I said the words Martin Luther King, what image pops in your mind? And, they all think of, some of the iconic images. And I said, a photojournalist, put that in your brain.
Yeah.
A photojournalist was the one who created that photo for you to think of. And I agree with you that, again, our photo staff here at the Tulsa World, as I told you guys are the eyes of Tulsa. You guys are the ones who are here to document what is going on for not only history, but for context, for us to understand some stuff. And one of the photos, again, I got a lot of Mike Simon's photos in my mind, but you were able, when you capture moments, sometimes things happen. Like you talk about the story about Kim, I can think of other stories that have happened. I think of people who have lost their jobs. I have think of people who have written a law. I have thought about people who have spoken up at a city council meeting after seeing one of your photos or a photo in the Tulsa World. And again, those photos stick with you. They don't just go away. But I think it's important for people to understand so many of the images in their mind. A photojournalist did that. Journalism did that. And this is why we're committed to it here at the Tulsa World. Mike, when you looking back at your career, having some time to reflect now, what do you think we've got to still keep in mind when it comes to photojournalism? Why do people need to understand that it's still really vital to our community?
Well, I think people now are more visually literate than ever, and people now look at pictures and images all day long. And photojournalism is different than those photos they're looking at typically. Yes. When you're on TikTok or you're on Instagram, you're getting everybody knows about the social media filter that people put on things. Whether it be a politician, whether it be the person that lives next door to you, there's a filter for social media that everything is great, everything is wonderful. You can trust photojournalists that we don't really care about that filter. If it's great, it'll look great. If it's horrible, it'll look horrible. And we need that documentation for the community because, like you said, in 100 years, people need to know what's going on and whether it was great or wonderful, or whether there was 19 people dug up from a cemetery in Tulsa and how those remains were treated, and how the community felt about it. People need to know that. So I think that's why it's important. An unfiltered look at society and an unfiltered look at our community is very important.
Absolutely. Well, Mike, thank you for joining me today. I'm sure we're going to be back together several other times this year as we, again, my job here is to try to tell the stories behind the stories of the Tulsa World. We have a lot of them. And my goal in this podcast is to talk to the editors, the reporters, the photographers, the people that work on things and say, okay, what happened here? Where'd this all start? So thank you for joining us today. Again, this podcast is available wherever you get podcasts from. We have 8 Tulsa World podcasts now available. And so search Tulsa World there, and also look up, we've also got podcasts on OU, OSU, TU, high school sports as well. But again, Mike, thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. It's fun to do it.